of an angle towards the first base line, a tiny bit to the right of home plate. So I can't see into the Dodgers dugout. I can see into both bullpens. I can see directly into the Rays dugout, but I cannot see into the Dodgers dugout. I believe had I been able to see into the Dodgers dugout with my binoculars, I would have been able to say he's not even in the dugout.
Right.
And if I had known he wasn't even in the dugout after he had come out of the game, I think I would have been able to report that. And then I would have been able to say it's, more than just a defensive substitution, clearly. And I mean, I agree it didn't make sense. So the reason why people who asked me where he was and were, had their own conspiracy theories, the reason why I thought it was a defensive substitution, even though that doesn't make sense, because Justin Turner, I believe, even at his ripe old age of 36, is a better defensive third baseman than Edwin Rios, per se, who hadn't even played really third base since the regular season. So, but Dave Roberts had made 3 defensive substitution moves at the exact same time. Right. He inserts Kike Hernandez, who hadn't pitched hit yet, at second base. He had put Chris Taylor out into left field rather than going, with a different direction with that. He thought Taylor was the better defensive choice in left field, and then Edwin Rios at third. So the reason why I said could be or maybe it's a defensive substitution is because there was other moves around it. So it kind of felt like these are my defensive moves, you know what I mean? Right. Late in the game. But had I known that Justin Turner had gone out of the dugout and was no longer there, then I would have thought something else. So, I tried to run through 2 theories, the defensive substitution theory and a theory that maybe he had aggravated his hamstring. And so I went back to look at his final at bat and other things to see if he had injured his hamstring at all. But his final at bat, if you remember, I think an inning before, was just a deep fly out to the track that we actually kind of got Steinered on and thought it was a home run.
Right.
And so
But Turner was smirking. He was smirking. He knew he didn't get it. And Arozarena
especially with the roof closed.
It was very close. And Arozarena made it look like a can of corn. So Turner, and I was looking at that too, because I'm like, is it the hamstrings? I know he dove on a couple of plays earlier in the game, but I didn't notice him jogging gingerly.
Yeah, correct. There was no wincing. There was no grabbing the hamstring. And I didn't say it was close. It was close, but I said with the roof closed, it probably wasn't going to get out. Had the roof been open, it maybe gets those extra inches and flies out. Right. But it wasn't the hamstring either. So I really didn't know. And I don't how anyone in their right mind could think someone would get pulled out of game 6 when the team is up of a clincher in the final 2 innings of a World Series game because they tested positive. That is something you would have thought would have happened before the game. And that's that. So to be honest with you, I didn't find out he had tested positive for COVID until after the game, as they're celebrating on the field. I wasn't watching the broadcast. I have now seen the broadcast since, and I know that they announced it once they went to the postgame show in studio at Fox in Los Angeles. And so I saw it on Twitter, and immediately, unfortunately, bittersweet for me, as I tried to soak in the celebration and do these things. Once we found out that it was COVID-19, national from New York for NBC started hitting me up. They needed me to contact sources. They needed me to get in the Zoom post-game Zooms and get to the bottom of this. So for your listeners who might not know the story of what happened, and then I can say my opinion at the end of it, they get tested in that bubble every single morning, and they get tested with a nasal swab test. They've been negative for 45 straight days, all players in MLB leading up to that. Monday was an off day before game 6. They were tested that day. Those samples then get sent to a lab in South Jordan, Utah, a sports medicine lab. And, Texas to Utah, whatever the travel time is. My understanding from reaching out to sources is those results don't come back usually for about 30 hours. So the results come back the following day and usually around 8 or 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, little bit, or Eastern Standard Time, sometimes too in that range. So Justin Turner's test, from Monday's off day came back around 8 or 9 p.m. Central Standard Time Tuesday, which happened to fall in the middle of game 6 in the 6th inning. What they reported was that was inconclusive from the lab. What I've been told, and this is the lab is saying it's inconclusive, and the president of the lab was saying it's inconclusive, so we have to go there. But what I was told from sources who had been hearing about this secondhand, the inconclusive was that it wasn't a full positive, but wasn't a full negative. So that's probably leading to it's possibly positive. So they reached out and contacted MLB in New York. MLB in New York's their main office then contacted Chris Young, former player who was at Globe Life Field in a suite with Commissioner Manfred. They contacted him at the game and told him of this. Chris Young spoke to Manfred. They both agreed that did they have the results from that morning, Tuesday's morning? Yes, they had already received them. So he said, okay, then can you try to pull out his samples from Tuesday and rush them out and get the results back as soon as possible? He said, yes, we could try to do that. So that is when they hadn't said anything yet. That is when they tested those. By the time the 7th inning rolls around, the director of the lab in Jordan had the results from Tuesday morning test the same day as the game, and those tested positive. So that is when he contacted Chris Young again, who talked to Manfred. Chris Young then went and spoke to Andrew Friedman and told him that Turner had tested positive and that he has to come out of the game. Wow. Friedman then went to the tunnel behind the dugout and asked a trainer, a member of the staff, to go grab Dave Roberts. So from my sources who saw this private conversation and overheard it between Roberts and Friedman out of sight of the dugout, but just beneath the dugout in the tunnel, he could hear them talking about Turner and knew something was going on. And from his discussion of overhearing this conversation, it was just more shock. And he had heard Friedman say to Robert, you got to take him out of the game. You got to take him out of the game. Roberts clearly wanted more explanation about taking out his star third baseman in the middle of the game with less than 6 outs to go to win the World Series. But nonetheless, that was what he had to do. So he had to take Justin Turner out of the game, who obviously was upset and shocked. Turner was taken by training staff members to a doctor's office room located in that bottom floor area close to the dugout of Globe Life Field, where he waited. At some point, I hopefully we'll get to hear from Justin Turner, or I'll get to hear from him. I reached out to him with no response back. But I'd love to see if there was a television in that doctor's office. I hope there was. I'm sure there was. But if he was able to at least watch those final outs. But he had to sit in there in isolation. He was able to get his phone and contact his wife, and she was able to come see him and stuff too. So that's where he remained. As the players have now said that were on the field, most of them did not know Justin Turner wasn't even in the game until Edwin Rios made that second out of the 8th inning.
I remember that. Yeah.
And so
that finds you when you're a defensive.
Exactly. And I knew it before the inning that something had happened, but most of the players, that's crazy. Most of the players on the Dodgers team didn't know it until Edwin Rios records that second out, and they go, hey, that's not a big red beard and red hair, out there at third base making that out. So that's crazy. And then we know what happens after that. But from what I've been told from sources and what the league has already announced is that after the celebration happened, somebody went back to say that they were going to get ready to take a team photo. And that is when Justin Turner wanted to leave isolation and leave there and come out for the team photo. I do not know. I was not told that. I don't think MLB had a security member or anybody forcing Turner in to stay in isolation. There was a member either of the Dodgers training staff, medical staff, or through MLB. I'm not sure who he is. I haven't seen him before, but that was with Turner, even when he left. So he, on his own accord, Justin Turner left isolation, left the doctor's room he was in, and came out to the dugout wearing a mask with his wife, Courtney, also wearing a mask, and they stayed in the dugout. Now, at this point, I have binoculars. I've moved to the left. I've moved to left field by the left field foul pole. They were doing a media party out there post game. and I could see Justin Turner there and Courtney in the dugout trying to lay low. There were people in the dugout, players and staff of the Dodgers, eating and hanging out. They saw him and congratulated him, hugged him and stuff. He was clearly emotional about it. He'd clearly been in tears about it, and still probably shell-shocked about what had happened.
Yeah.
And he was trying to be responsible and just wait until they said, okay, come out to take the picture. And there was an official, like I said, don't know if it's with the Dodgers specifically or with MLB. There was somebody with him. Once someone came down to get him and said, okay, it's time to take the picture, he and Courtney went out to the mound, took pictures with the trophy, waited for the whole team to gather. And I didn't see him take his mask off. And ironically, Dave Roberts, as this is happening, is on his post-game Zoom saying, I still haven't seen Turner.
I remember that. Yeah.
Since this happened. And I'm like, well, I have eyes on him. So,
right.
But then, and I actually thought at the time, and I tweeted this and had to delete it, but I didn't think Dave Roberts was going to make it for the team photo, because literally they're ready to take the photo and Roberts is still on the Zoom. But long story short, maybe they waited, or I don't know, took a couple photos without him before they took the official ones, but Roberts does make it out. Turner's there. And that's when Turner first takes his mask off. This is the only time I saw him without a mask while he was out there, is when they took the team photo and when he took the photos with the trophy kissing his wife. And yeah, I get it. I understand it. I understand all sides of this. So, you know, after the game and after these images started to float out and the video floats out, for example, as people disassembled from that team photo, Turner directly went to Andrew Friedman, who had been sitting to his left during the team photo, to the left of the trophy. And the official that had been with him the whole time was also there. And another member of the Dodgers staff was there. And the four of them were talking, and it seems like Turner was just trying to get to the bottom of it, and see what happened, or what he can do, or what happens next, if he's allowed to come home, things like that. And then he left and went back underneath the dugout with the team official following him after that. And that's what happened live and in the moment. So
no,
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say this. Here's what got me on this. And by the way, appreciate the insight. I love everything you just gave. And I want to get to your opinion about this in just a second. Here's what got me. If it was two things. One, if it was inconclusive, why was he allowed to play? Because I covered the Sparks this year, and Taya Cooper, the rookie point guard for the Sparks, who, by the way, is also the fiance of Dwight Howard, she had an inconclusive test, and she was not allowed to play in one of those regular season games until she had, I think, 2 negative tests in a row. So if he had an inconclusive test, why was he still allowed to play in game 6? Like, I'm not 100% sure, like, what the protocols were on the inconclusive test, because if it was inconclusive, then they should have said, okay, we're going to need a whole turnaround until we know before the first pitch of game 6 that he has at least a negative test.
Yeah, the situation, the entire situation is unfortunate and shocking to me, but I think for the most part, MLB handled it the right way, even though I really would have wanted to see Turner finish that game and do everything he would have done and then pull him. The other thing I really have a problem with is that it was announced live on national television, and I'd like to know, did Justin Turner give them the clearance to announce his test results publicly? And I hope he did, because it's a HIPAA violation if they didn't. And I hope Justin Turner did it so that people knew he wasn't hurt, and it wasn't like he didn't want to be out there. He wanted people to know. And the fact that he then texted closely thereafter and said he was fine tells me he probably said it was okay to announce it. But I just don't want to make sure that that was the case. And it's frustrating. So inconclusive tests are not uncommon, as you just mentioned, with player for the Sparks who's engaged to Dwight Howard. But most of the time, if it's inconclusive, unless there's just a bad nasal swab or something, it usually means that like a positive test is looming, because as we know, you can kind of like test negative and still have contracted it, and then it shows up, and there's an incubation period sometimes of up to 14 days where you could have it and not be testing positive. And so sometimes as you get closer to it, the inconclusive tests come up. I've taken antibody tests, which are like a pregnancy test almost, in the sense that the lines change colors. And I've seen where it's supposed to be like a dark purple to mean that you've tested positive or that you have it. I've seen it be like a very, very light purple. So that would lead me to be, it's inconclusive, but there's indication it could be positive. So I definitely say, to answer your question, they didn't get the results back before the game, so he couldn't be pulled or told not to play before the game. And once they had the inconclusive test results in the second inning, it's hard to pull a guy out of the game when you don't have physical proof that he has this.
Yeah.
So I think MLB made the right decision by saying, just pull his samples from Tuesday and let's see if those are positive, right? I feel like MLB would have been hoping those would have also been inconclusive, and I doubt they would have pulled them if those were inconclusive or if they had been negative. But the fact that they were positive, and now you had a clear proof that he was out on the field with COVID-19, you had to do something about it, especially if it had leaked later that you let him stay in the game and finish it while knowing this. I think that is even worse optics than the optics of him coming back out with his teammates. Now, as far as the opinion in that moment, like I said, I understand both sides of this.
Right.
For Justin Turner, who the biggest thing about this, in my opinion, is that he's a free agent at the end of the year. He's a free agent now, as we're speaking on this podcast.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely no guarantee he's back with the Dodgers next year. This may be his only opportunity to take a photo with the trophy, to even see the trophy, and to be with his teammates and be in that team photo. So I can absolutely understand his desire to be out there. And as we spoke to teammates in the Zoom calls, and I reached out to sources and players, with the team, they all had no problems with Justin Turner being out there with them. Zero. He's a member of this team, positive or not. He's been living in the bubble with us at their hotel at the Four Seasons there. So they had no problem with him being out there on that stuff with a mask and even without a mask for the team photo. And for the most part, I think they kind of, were careful with it, except he was pretty close to Dave Roberts, as far as there was no 6 feet between him and Dave Roberts in that team photo. And other than his wife, there was nobody else I saw when he was not wearing a mask that he could have, given it to or contracted it to. So it's unfortunate. But I also see the side of it that the only people he's been in close contact with are people inside that bubble.
Right.
And his teammates who he's on the field with. And so if people think that he hasn't been that close to Dave Roberts without a mask the entire game, innings 1 through 7, when he even got taken out, you're crazy. Like, Dave Roberts, if Dave Roberts had it, he'd already been exposed.
Sure.
And it'll be interesting now that it's over and everyone's back home and living their lives or going on vacation, to see if anybody tests positive in the next week or two.
And that's what I was.
And they're not getting tested.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, when everyone said, well, everyone tested negative the very next day, I'm like, of course, but you guys aren't taking into account the incubation period. What probably should have happened, actually, and I'm not trying to be like a COVID expert, they should have kept everybody in Arlington, Texas for at least another week and done another round of testing before anyone was allowed to leave home.
Yeah, I agree. But the problems with that are so steep, meaning, like, I'm sure like they only had the hotel rented and paid for a certain time.
Right.
People want to go home, families want to go home, players on the team. I mean, it's so again, that was the next part, is we didn't know when they were going to go home. One flight left early in the morning. People that weren't in the bubble that were associated with the team, that flight left, a charter flight into LAX. That had like owners like Magic Johnson, Mark Walter, family members who were not in the bubble but that needed to get back. Those people were also allowed to be on that team charter celebration flight. The flight that actually had the players on it, the United Airlines charter flight, that didn't leave until late afternoon on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And everybody had to take negative tests. They were tested first Tuesday night when they got back to the hotel with a rapid test, and then they did another test Wednesday morning. My understanding from sources, nobody tested positive except for Justin Turner on that on those two. So that's 2 negative tests, Tuesday nights and Wednesday mornings. That allowed the team to fly back with the trophy. Some players were even allowed to fly back on their own. I know Jock Peterson chartered a private jet and flew back with his family and his new baby boy on a private jet.
Right.
So that was good for them. And most of them were on that United charter flight, most of them in first class section. Some people out in coach if they wanted more seats and stuff. But that's what flew back on the trophy and the videos that you saw, from NBC and other news outlets getting off the plane and things like that. Justin Turner was left behind. I believe he is now back in LA as well and in quarantine with his wife, Courtney. And I don't know if she tested positive, but I'm assuming at this point she probably has, but I don't want to assume, but those are the only two that were left behind at the hotel, and they were able to make it back on their own at some point safely. So that's the situation. I understand the optics look horrible of it, and I understand people's outrage because the irony here is so palpable in the sense that Justin Turner was the team leader during the season when the Miami Marlins had an outbreak and the St. Louis Cardinals had an outbreak, telling people we need to up our game here with the Dodgers. We need to wear masks all the time. We need to stop with the handshakes. We need to stop with the high fives. We need to make sure we are just going home to our families after the game. We're not going anywhere. We're not exposing ourselves. Mm-hmm. He was the ringleader of that. Mm-hmm. So for him to be the one who tested positive and then break his own protocols that he was living by for the last 3 months, to be out there with his team for the team picture and the photo with the trophy. It's ironic that he would do that. And it looks very bad because you look like a hypocrite in doing that. At the same time, that may be his only chance with the trophy. It may be his only chance to be in that team photo, unless they're going to Photoshop him in later or something. So I totally understand that aspect of it. And for people listening, and I was watching, he was not on the field during the presentation of the trophy with Manfred and with Fox Sports, where Dave Roberts spoke and thanked guys like Ross Stripling, Rick Honeycutt, guys that weren't there. He was not there for that. He was not there when Corey Seager received his Chevy truck and his World Series MVP trophy. He was not there. He was not there, as they were celebrating, they let families out of the gate. And for people who also saw families on the field, from being there live throughout the entire duration of the bubble and the playoffs in Arlington, those people were in the bubble too. It wasn't like people who weren't in the bubble were allowed on the field. So for example, there's kind of 2 types of family, right? Your girlfriend or wife and your kids that living in the 4 seasons with you, and people like friends, aunts and uncles, parents who are in the stands, but not in the bubble with you.
Right.
Those second tier family members, will say, were not allowed on the field. Great. The husbands, wives, and kids who were in the bubble the whole time, they were allowed on the field finally. They had been staying in like a VIP area to the right of the dugout. You couldn't get to the field from there, so they had to go through the back, and that's how they were finally allowed on the field. So Justin Turner has been exposed to them over the last month in the bubble in the hotel also. But I didn't see him come out till about an hour later when they were finally taking that team photo, and the World Series trophy, the commissioner's trophy, was on the mound, that hunk of metal. And that's when he finally came out. So, I mean, I sympathize for him. I give him a little bit of a break, and I can see both sides. And I can also see how this narrative would have changed if he had never come out and, stuck to the protocols and stuck to what the league had agreed to, the Players Association had agreed to, that he himself had agreed to, in the bittersweetness of him not being able to celebrate in that moment. Those optics and that narrative, we all would have been on Justin Turner's side. Our heart would have broke for him. Yeah. We would have just been like, he would have become a martyr almost by his sacrifice to not be out there. Right. And that could be just as powerful, but obviously you don't get to be with the trophy and this thing that you've worked hard for your whole career. So I understand his side of it. I understand the people's side of it. And I can't tell you there's a right or wrong answer there. And I honestly, if I was in his shoes, I probably would have gone back out there too. I'm just being honest. Yeah. As selfish as that sounds, I would have been asking the same questions. I don't want to infect anybody. If I have this, I would be asked. I also want to know, and we'll find out if he ever speaks about it, how he believes he contracted this. Mm-hmm. Because there's 2 sides to this, right? If he never left the bubble, he did everything correctly. Okay. If he didn't do any breaking of protocols, if he did not pull a Zach Plesac or a Mike Clevenger like the Indians did when they broke it, if he didn't do any of that, and he could have gotten this from somebody who worked at Globe Life Field, an employee as he comes to the stadium, an employee of the Four Seasons Hotel, or even the fans, 12,000 of them almost, who are inside a stadium with a closed roof and circulated air. If somehow he had gotten it from them on the field, though I would surprise that he's the only one who would have tested positive, then that is on MLB. That is not on Justin Turner. So it'll be interesting to see how he contracted that too. I think that's the second part of the story. But, you know, in our news cycle, I think he's lucky that the election is now coming up. I don't think people will be talking about this part of it here shortly or very forward, but we can move on to another topic. But it's a very good point. And it does add a bittersweetness to this whole championship.
Yeah, it really does. And it's sort of a sad story. You kind of put a little bit of a dark cloud over what was supposed to be a really joyous occasion. I mean, we're talking about a 32-year drought. We're talking over the last 7-8 years, year in and year out, a lot of heartbreak. And the thing is with Justin Turner, this wasn't just the 25th man on the bench. This guy has been the heart and soul of this organization for really the better part of the last 5-6 years. I mean, he came in as a non-roster invitee. He didn't have a guaranteed contract in 2014, continued to get better year in and year out, was an all-star, was a NLCS MVP. And you could always tell, even to this day, Mike, when he's out of the lineup, the Dodgers feel that lack of presence. For as good as Seager and Bellinger and Betts and Muncy and all these guys are, they are not the same without Justin Turner, which is why I believe he'll still remain a Dodger at least through the next couple of years. I still believe they come through with an extension because I just don't think that the market is going to be there as much as he thinks, even though now he is a World Series champion. So, obviously I have my own opinion on it. I think he probably should have stayed in the dugout, but at the same point in time, I'm not going to crucify him for coming out. That was a major moment. He already, like you said, exposed those people. So, I mean, what difference does another 15 to 20 minutes make to have a genuine photo op with the trophy as well as with the guys that you've been through the trenches with this whole time? So that's what it is. But moving forward, I know we could spend just a whole podcast on that alone. Moving forward, another two guys who've been a big part of this organization for the better part of 7 years have been Clayton Kershaw and Kenley Jansen. Even though Jansen, his role has kind of diminished, he has kind of been not the same guy as he was maybe 3-4 years ago. I still think that these guys deserve a lot of credit, him and Kershaw both, and it was great to see Kershaw come through in this World Series. What do you think this World Series means to those two guys, even though maybe Kershaw wasn't the ace and Jansen wasn't that shutdown closer that they were in recent years? What do you think this trophy still means to them?
Yeah, so those are the two people you mentioned most people are so happy for. And so for Clayton Kershaw, I'll address each one individually. For Clayton Kershaw, it means everything, and it's this huge monkey off his back, probably more so than Kenley Jansen, although I would argue that the reason why the Dodgers don't have potentially 3 World Series championships right now is more on Kenley Jansen than Clayton Kershaw, in my opinion. Just if you look at the actual World Series games, 3 World Series blown saves, losing multiple games late, including that game 5 that we all blame Kershaw for, that we now know the Astros were cheating and had signs on. It was Kenley who lost that game late. The Dodgers had rallied back to take a lead and tie the game, and it was Kenley who blew that game too. And and that's also on the managers leaving him out and making those decisions as well. But for Clayton Kershaw specifically, the narrative is over. It's dead. You know what I mean? Right. You can Monday morning quarterback it as much as you want. We can discuss it as much as you want. The numbers will always be what they are, better in the regular season than the postseason, but he will always now be a World Series champion forever.
Yeah.
So whatever you want to say, he has checked the last box. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer, could be unanimous like, Jeter was or almost was. To me, there's no more questions on him, and he knows that. And this finally gets that huge monkey off his back. And you can see it. You can see how he savored it. You can see the happiness in his face and in his eyes. You can see it in his Jimmy Kimmel interview that he did afterwards on Zoom. So for Clayton Kershaw, everybody is so happy for him, including that video of Dave Roberts, that gift that goes on where he says, "I'm so happy for you." Everybody is happy for Kershaw because everybody wanted this for him. He works so hard. He is such a great leader. He leads by example. He's not a Mookie Betts vocal leader or a Justin Turner vocal leader. He is a lead by example leader. Yeah. And every single one of his teammates say he's one of the best teammates he had because he pushes people to be better by getting in the weight room, by doing the routine, by putting in the work. And so everyone knowing how much work he's put in and how great his career has been, this was the only thing missing. He now has that. For Kenley Jansen, as a leader of the team and someone who had been there as long as Clayton Kershaw, who caught Clayton Kershaw in the minor leagues when he was a catcher before he became a relief pitcher.
Yep.
For Kenley, this is just his goal. It's not so much getting the monkey off of the back for Kenley. It is like, this is the goal I've always wanted, to bring a World Series championship to Los Angeles, just like Justin Turner's goal as well. And so those guys being the longest tenured Dodgers, it's great for him to finally get that. I don't think it's so much of a narrative for him. It wasn't like Kenley got to do the save. Dave Roberts did the smart thing and let Julio Reyes come out and close it and didn't give
absolutely
Dodgers
fantastic, man.
Yeah. So for Kenley, for Kershaw, he gets a monkey off the bat. He got 2 wins in the World Series. He pitched great in the World Series. He pitched great for most of these playoffs. He didn't have that implosion game. And so Kershaw's narrative changes and he gets that World Series champion. And for Kenley, he's accomplished what he always wanted to accomplish in a Dodger uniform and win the World Series title. So you feel great for both of those guys. You feel great for Justin Turner. And you feel great for everybody. And those 2 final things I'll say is, one, as you mentioned, 2 World Series championships in the NBA and in MLB for the Dodgers and Lakers in 2.5 weeks' time. The first time we will ever see that, I think, in history. The first time LA has become the city of champions, winning those 2 sports titles since 1988, which is also ironic, 32 years. But I actually, this is funny you mentioned this because I was going through my notepad on my phone where like I keep notes and stuff. And I had a headline written for an article I was thinking about writing over a month ago. And that headline was, are we living in like a hell frozen over alternate reality where finally the Lakers win the championship in the year that Kobe passes away, and the Dodgers break the 32-year World Series drought as well, and we can't celebrate it. We can't have parades. We're stuck at home. It's not at Dodger Stadium. It's not at Staples Center. Is this just the complete like best case / worst case scenario combining for us as LA citizens and as fans of these 2 teams who've wanted this so long? And I wrote that over a month ago. Like, wouldn't it be ironic if it finally happens and we can't be there to witness it? We can't be there to celebrate it. And
that's
we can't
the price.
fade down Sepulveda Boulevard. And obviously we'll take the championships. The feeling of being on top is the best, but it is completely bittersweet to not be able to do that. And only in 2020 is this the year we finally get these 2 trophies back in LA. So it sucks, but we'd rather win them than lose them, obviously, just for the pride and I guess talking about it factor. And then the second thing is what we said about Kershaw and Kenley and all these guys. And it looks like it took Mookie Betts to get this team over the top.
Yeah.
And it's just so crazy when you do talk MVP, and statistically speaking, Seager has been that guy. And as we talked about the last time on your podcast, we could make an argument he's the MVP of the season. But when you see the difference between a Mookie Betts Dodger team and a Mookie Betts not Dodger team, you see what the Dodgers were missing maybe in these previous years. They had the talent, they had the stuff, but what they didn't have was a championship pedigree and the kind of swagger of a guy who can do it all, including those bang bang put out plays at the plate that Mookie Betts made, including to score the go-ahead run in that game and then hitting the home run for the insurance run. That just tells you how valuable Mookie Betts is and how much they were missing him. And when Dave Roberts said, and I can say 2 things about this, when Dave Roberts said he believes they would have won the 2018 World Series over the Boston Red Sox, if they had Mookie Betts, and Mookie Betts wasn't on the Red Sox. I can say that now, over these last 8 years, I guess, of watching this, the best team I saw the Dodgers play was that 2018 Boston Red Sox team in the postseason.
Yeah.
And I would love to see the 2020 team. Maybe we can only watch this on MLB The Show. I would love to see the 2020 team with Mookie Betts and with David Price against the 2018 team with Mookie Betts and David Price go head to head to see who would be a better team, because I think that'd be an unbelievable matchup.
It's a great no, that'd be pretty awesome. And Mookie was absolutely sensational. And the thing was, Mike, we had been talking about for a long time the Bryce Harper situation. Would they bring back Manny Machado? Would they consider cutting ties with Corey Seager or putting him over? This is what happens when you wait, plan, marshal your resources, and then you put it all in for that one special guy. Now, we saw the Lakers do this with Anthony Davis. We're gonna wait for that right star, and then we're gonna go all in on that right star. And the Dodgers, did they go all in? Yes and no. They went all in the sense of they went after Mookie and they gave him the 12-year extension, and so far he's looking like he's paying off on that. But you didn't necessarily have to mortgage the farm to get him, which was the difference between the Lakers and the Dodgers. And obviously the sports are different, the transactions are different. We get that, but it was sort of the same pedigree almost when you really think about it. Like, let's go after this particular guy because he's going to help us get over the hump. And we saw Anthony Davis deliver on the big stage, and we saw Mookie Betts deliver on the big stage. So I think that was definitely important to acknowledge. But as far as, I got a couple more for you, Mike.
Before you ask that, to add on to what you just said, for people that believe in fate or destiny or things happen for a reason and serendipity, you mentioned this, and I'm glad you mentioned it because it just popped into my head. The Dodgers went in on Bryce Harper. If Bryce Harper wanted to go a smaller deal with bigger money and make $40 million a year instead of 20 whatever or 30 what he's going to make over his long deal in Philadelphia, he could be in a Dodger uniform, and he could be flying on private jets back to his home in Las Vegas whenever he wanted and things like that. And if that had happened, they would not have Mookie Betts right now. Sure. Obviously.
Yeah.
There was other names mentioned that they were going to go after. In fact, they swung and missed on Bryce Harper. So instead they signed AJ Pollock, thinking that he could be a good plan B. And he wasn't in 2019, but in 2020, he had a great retail year and helped contribute to this team. Yeah, he was solid. So it just goes to show you. And here's another thing. Kenta Maeda was not happy in Los Angeles. He wanted out because he wanted to be a starter. He believed he was a frontline starting pitcher. He was sick of going to the bullpen late in the season and in the playoffs and being a relief pitcher. And as he proved, he's going to be a Cy Young finalist in the American League in 2020. And so he was not happy. So you move him out, you give up a guy like Alex Verdugo, who was in a crowded outfield as it was. You give up some young players that you had acquired just for this reason. You didn't necessarily have room for, like in Jeter Downs, like assets that can go back. Same thing with Colton Wong. You acquired these guys in other trades so that you had valuable pieces that you could either keep if you wanted or trade in a scenario where you can get a guy like Mookie Betts.
Right.
And not only do you get Mookie Betts, who clearly put you over the top like you were hoping, you also got maybe the future closer to replace Kenley Jansen's throne in Brusdar Graterol, who was huge in the postseason for you and became one of your most high leverage relievers. So, like I said, what a different world this would be if they had actually, gotten Bryce Harper or Starling Marte or these other guys they had gone after when just by waiting and being patient, it set it up to get Mookie Betts. Now you got him. You didn't have to give up too much for it.
No.
You got a potential all-star closer in return for it in Graterol, maybe.
And you still got a solid starter in David Price. I'm sorry to interrupt, but David Price is going to be the third head on this monster next year with Clayton Kershaw, who doesn't really look like much has dropped off. I mean, at least not yet. And he's still been able to, as long as he is able to stay healthy. But between Price, Buehler, Kershaw, you got a front three. Then you got Gonsolin or May, along with Julio Urias. This rotation is going to be right back in a great position next year. And David Price, even though it was more of a salary dump for Boston, he is going to provide that stability within the rotation that we didn't see a whole heck of a lot of throughout this postseason. I just want that to be thrown in there as well.
Yeah. Hopefully they definitely needed him. And I can tell you from listening to interviews with him, I haven't spoken with him or contacted him, but listening to interviews with David Price, it does seem like he regrets it a little bit. It does seem like his original decision to opt out was based on, he didn't think that the MLB would be able to pull this off.
Right.
He didn't think that the season would even go on. He just thought COVID was too strong. And once he saw just how responsible and diligent and determined the players were to not get this and do what they needed to do to keep everybody safe, I think part of him regrets not going back out there and doing that, because he was wrong in what he thought was going to end up happening. And he could have been out here for this whole thing. And what a year where he would have been able to play his former team in the Rays, the team that drafted him, the team he won the Cy Young with, and be on the mound for it and not let those bullpen games happen in game 2 and game 6. He would have been a steady starter.
Exactly.
If he's out there, I don't think that series with the Braves goes 7. I think the Dodgers would have won it earlier. So just crazy alternate realities is what I wanted to bring up when you mentioned, Harper and other guys. And so not only do things work out perfectly, do things happen for a reason, but now you're going to have Mookie Betts in a Dodger uniform for 12 more years when, Harper maybe would be gone at the end of this year or next year or something had you done that move. So it just goes to show you that things happen for a reason, and they got the perfect guy at the perfect time.
Exactly. And speaking of perfect guy at the perfect time, he was definitely not lifted at the perfect time. Blake Snell, I wanted to get your opinion on this because I know we've had some conversations about analytics and things like that before. Blake Snell gets pulled. He was absolutely dominant. I mean, I wasn't sure if I was watching Blake Snell or the second coming to Randy Johnson or Steve Carlton in that game. He was just absolutely mowing down that Dodger lineup in game 6. Austin Barnes floats one out there into center field and a line drive with 1 on and 1 out in the 6th inning. Kevin Cash pulls the quick hook. He brings in Nick Anderson, and at this point, the Dodgers are licking their chops. They're probably thankful that Snell's out of the game. He was only at 73 pitches, and I understand here's what the numbers say at the 3rd time around. But I don't understand Mike White so hard these days to use your eyes a little bit more. And even Tim Kirchin said, forgive the impersonation, we've lost all feel for the game of baseball if you are a manager in today's game. Because here's the thing, it's one thing to use analytics, and I'll never forget what Dave Dombrowski said after the Red Sox beat the Dodgers 2 years ago. He said, listen, analytics has been around for a long time. We've called it different things. We give that information to the managers, but we let them manage. It's just there as a tool. It seems as though all these managers, including Dave Roberts at times, have become over-dependent on them instead of using their eyes. Yeah, the numbers say this, but Snell is dealing. Why not just leave him out there, even if it is Mookie Betts coming in, even if it is a 1-0 game? Because let's be honest, your bullpen has been overworked and they've been tagged in this series. So why do you think that two-part question? Why do you think that Kevin Cash pulled Blake Snell as quickly as he did and not trusting his eyes? And 2, was this game a loss for analytics in baseball?
Yes to both questions. And I know we all know the answer, but I'll tell you the answer to the first part of your question. So there's a lot to digest and chop up there. So first and foremost, that is one of the most egregious, horrible decisions to pull Blake Snell from the game that I have ever seen. As we talked about with Justin Turner, I can understand different scenarios and what happened and all the sides. I know why he did it. I don't understand it. I don't think it's the right decision. It makes 0 sense to me. So, but a couple of questions to your answer on why did he do it and why do we let the analytics dictate it? So, and you mentioned the Dombrowski quote. Well, yes, they give the analytics numbers to the managers. They also have pregame meetings where they say, let's try to break down the game as much as we can and say, okay, in scenario A, we're going to do this. In scenario B, we're going to do this. In scenario C, we're going to go do this. In scenario D, we're going to do this. And then there's sometimes the complete outer realm where you can't script or plan for anything, all hell breaks loose scenario that you don't really have a game plan for. In this scenario, I'm sure the analytics, and I know the analytics said that 3rd time through the lineup, especially batting orders 1 through 4, Blake Snell struggles. The OPS goes through the roof. traditionally the last 2 seasons for Blake Snell. Okay. So the game plan going into it, I'm sure there was a team meeting with it because the Rays were the creators of the analytics and ahead of the game with it. You know what I mean? Not necessarily the money ball, but similar in that aspect. These were the smart Harvard, MIT, bring the smartest guys in the room and let's figure out how in a very small market we can get guys with the right payroll to be their best versions of themselves and to put them in the best situations to win. So that conversation was before the game. Blake Snell's going to go through the lineup twice, period, end of story. Doesn't matter pitch count, doesn't matter anything else. This is what the numbers said. So this is what Kevin Cash is going to do. Now, does Kevin Cash go against the numbers, go against the front office, and let him go out and keep going? That's the right decision in that moment. And I'll tell you why. Because numbers are great, and in a large sample size and multiple simulations, the numbers will probably turn out to be the majority of the true. The numbers don't speak to anomalies. The numbers don't speak to situational things that change the numbers. So in this instance, speaking with the pitching coach of the Rays after the game, he had said that Blake Snell in that game 6 was the best he had ever seen him since his Cy Young year 3 years before, I believe.
Yeah, 2018.
2018 year, yeah. Well, seasons before, though.
Oh, yeah, of course. I got you.
In the third season before.
Yeah.
So he was better. That's game 6. He was better than he saw him all of 19 and all of 20. And he said he was even better that he saw him in game 2 of the series. And what he meant by that was it wasn't just one pitch working or 2 pitch working, or this was all of his pitches were working and doing everything he wanted. And he was absolutely dominant and mowing guys down. And beyond the numbers of the eyes, if you know that, like it's one thing, as Kershaw said when he pitched, the night prior in game 5, hey, my slider wasn't as good as it was in game 1. My curveball wasn't as good as it was in game 1, but my fastball was okay. Well, okay, that's a reason to pull Kershaw a little bit early if you know this, if you know he's struggling to go through and his pitches aren't where they need to be or want to be. But if Kershaw said, every single one of my pitches is on and I'm lights out, maybe Dave Roberts lets him go a little bit longer in that situation. Sure. Yeah. And Kevin Cash knew that, and he saw that in game 6, and he still went with the numbers and stuff. And the other thing is that there's things that you can look at. So like, for example, Mookie Betts against left-handed pitchers and against a slider specifically has been dominant all year, but he struck out twice in that game against Blake Snell's slider. So those numbers shouldn't say that, right? Mookie Betts should hit a slider against a left-handed pitcher, but not Blake Snell's slider, not on that night, not the way he was throwing. So those are the anomalies I'm talking about. And yes, I was surprised he let it go out and finish. We wonder if Austin Barnes doesn't single, if he lets him get the final out of that inning because there'd be nobody on base, and then probably pulls him, lets him face Betts and then pulls him. But on the flip side of it, the more you see a pitcher, the more you see what the pitches are doing, whether they're on or not, the advantage goes to the hitter. So if, for example, Betts hits a double off of him anyway, and now Barnes is on second and third, and now you have Seager coming up and stuff, and let's say Seager just gets a single and 2-run score and you're down 2-1 anyways, soft contact or whatever, Blake Snell still is down losing. Now your job might be in jeopardy if you're Kevin Cash because you didn't listen to the game plan, you didn't listen to what the numbers said, and you went out there and ran the dice. So I get that part, but the right decision would have been 100%. You let him go out there and finish.
Especially, and Mike, your bullpen was struggling. I cannot say this enough. The bullpen was struggling. Nick Anderson was getting tagged. Pete Fairbanks was getting tagged. Maybe you could go with Diego Castillo, but I mean, even he has shown, even going back to the ALCS, he was tagged. So your bullpen is spent. This guy is your best option out there at that particular time. This is where the eye test comes in. This is where the feel comes in. And yeah, if the management group wants to fire me on that, you know what? At least I say I go out on my own terms because this guy was dominating. And if you guys just want to keep looking at your graphs instead of what's going out on the field, that's fine. Then I don't need to be here. But I mean, once again, they are going after these managers, I think, who are willing to kowtow to the front office. And I think what's the point of having a manager then? You need to give some rope the way Dombrowski gave it to Cora. Say what you want about Cora, he still understood the feel of the game. Same with AJ Hinch, where they don't over depend on these numbers. They will look at how a pitcher is doing in that moment.
Correct. And that would have been the right decision to leave him in. And as I was about to say, was I also spoke to every single Dodgers hitter in that lineup that night and talked to them. They all said Snell could have completed that game. He could have had a complete game shutout had they left him in. He was that dominant, that nasty. They couldn't touch him. And they were so glad that he came out and they saw Nick Anderson in that situation. And the last thing I'll say, and I didn't even think about this until I did watch the broadcast on the recorded replay on the DVR after, as Smoltz said, when you're in a rhythm as a starting pitcher, there's nothing more valuable than being in a rhythm. It's like when we saw For the Love of the Game, when Kevin Costner throws the perfect game, he's just in the complete zone thinking about everything else. You don't touch that because there's no guarantee a reliever warming up is going to be able to come in and have the same dominant rhythm. So go with the guy. And if you see anything, if the pitches aren't looking the same, if the rhythm is gone, then maybe take Snell out if that's what you want to do, instead of just going with what you said, the eye or the feel.
And
hold on 1 second if you can. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So sorry, a couple more questions. So,
you ready?
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say about that is thank God he did take him out, because I can only imagine what would have happened if the Dodgers had lost that game with the Justin Turner positive test and what we'd be talking about now. And it's ironic because once Justin Turner did test positive and came back out onto the field and took his mask off, that became the storyline and not the fact that Kevin Cash took Blake Snell out.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be. We would probably still be playing Game 7. We'd probably still be in the middle of this World Series right now if that didn't happen. I just think honestly, Mike, the last thing about analytics, it would not surprise me if now some of these GMs start looking at each other and say, you know what got us here is one thing, but what's going to get us over the hump is that if we are willing to call an audible at the line of scrimmage every now and then, based on what our eyes are telling us, based on our instincts, based on our feel for the game. We've got to be more flexible when it comes to that. And I think that's going to be the next thing where analytics are still used, but I think in higher leverage situations, there's going to be the little caveat, the little footnote that tells managers, hey, if a guy's got it working, use your instinct. And I think they should empower those managers, the GMs and the front office execs who are analytics dependent should empower those managers to basically use that eye test and to say, hey, if a guy's dealing, you use your best judgment from there. Here are the numbers. They're there if you need it.
Yeah, and I will say something to that. Obviously, that's not the way the game is trending. You keep mentioning Dombrowski from that 2018 Red Sox team. Well, because he went for broke in that year, and then the team now has to rebuild, he's no longer there. And you know who is? A
Chaim
Tampa Bay
Bloom.
Rays front office guy who's going to do the same analytics now with the Boston Red Sox. And guess who were the final four guys standing in the league championship series before the World Series? Andrew Friedman and three of his proteges who have worked under him, in the course of his career. So that's clearly the direction it's trending. But to your point, I tweeted a joke about this that, is this the Scooby-Doo ending where we rip off the Kevin Cash mask after the game and see that it's really Dave Roberts underneath? Because that's the only person I would know who would pull Blake Snell in that situation. But what did we see from Dave Roberts in game 7 of the NLCS and game 6 of this? In years past, Dave Roberts would say, 9th inning, 2-run game, save situation, Kenley. That's what the situation calls for. That's what the role is. That's what I'm going to do, whether it bites them again and again and again. Yeah. And again, like you said, this is what got them there, but that doesn't necessarily make it the right decision in the moment. So Dave Roberts, for the first time in his entire tenure with the Dodgers, started to go off script, off plan, trust his eyes, trust his gut, trust his feel. And ironically, it's the same guy on the mound in both situations, but let Julio Urias go out there and finish those games because he was dealing. Those are not things he would have done ever before that I saw. So maybe it took getting there, trusting the numbers, trusting the analytics, and failing to realize you can't do the definition of insanity and keep repeating the same things over and over again and expecting different results. Yeah. And so maybe this is what Kevin Cash needed, so that if the Rays were to get back there again, or even a team that he manages in the future gets back there again, he probably doesn't pull Blake Snell in that situation, knowing that, okay, I trusted what got us here. I trusted the numbers, but sometimes you have to let a guy who's dominant go out there and just do his job and pitch. And that's how you win championships, necessarily than just that's how you get to a position to play for a championship.
Exactly. If Denzel Washington or Robert De Niro want to go into an ad lib off script, you're going to let them do that. Mike, final question for me. By the way, you've been more than generous with your time. I really appreciate it. Michael J. Duarte, NBC sports reporter, Dodger beat writer, Laker beat writer, done a tremendous job with his coverage. Off season, you touched on it. We're in the middle of the off season now. We're going to do the awards coming up very soon. And then we're going to have the off season trades, signings. It's a pretty deep free agent class. I don't think it's star-studded, but a lot of guys that could come in and help a ball club. The Dodgers have 7 of them. Alex Wood, Pedro Baez, Blake Trinan, Justin Turner, Jock Peterson, Kike Hernandez, just to name a few. Where do you think the Dodgers are going to put their focus on? How many of those free agents do you think they bring back? And can you see them pursuing somebody else on the free agent market to shore up a need, particularly in the bullpen?
I actually believe they have 8 free agents on the major league roster.
Okay.
So I can go down all 8 for you. One of the names you're forgetting, I didn't hear all of them, but the 2 names you're probably forgetting. Hold on, my connection says it's unstable.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
The 2 names you're probably forgetting are Jimmy Nelson, who we never even saw a pitch or throw a pitch in a Dodger uniform, who the club option, the Dodgers declined. So he's now a free agent. And Jake McGee, who they brought over in a trade from the Rockies, who is also now a free agent. So I'll go down the line and think, I'll just be honest right up front. I think the only one of the 8 free agents I just mentioned, or what you mentioned, you and I combined mentioned, that could be back with the team next year is Justin Turner. I agree with what you said as far as the market for him at 36 years old, soon to be 37 years old, isn't going to be what he thinks it is. His defensive numbers have declined. We know he can still hit. He's never going to go out there and hit 40 home runs for you, but we know he can, hit above 300 for an entire year if need be. He's been an all-star before. So, and the biggest thing is, like, he's played for the Baltimore Orioles. He's played for the New York Mets, but he's never reached these heights until he came to the Dodgers. He's a Southern California native, born and raised. He loves the community. His foundations are there. He has a home here, wife, friends, everything. I think it behooves both parties in this situation to bring him back on a smaller deal, less money. And I think Justin Turner's willing to take less at his age to come back and play. I don't think he'll be driven by money in his free agent decision. It'll be driven to return to this team that has given him this platform and that he's so comfortable and happy with, and also just being a leader. With that said, there is one scenario that I can think of where he doesn't return to the team. And that is, there's rumors that the Dodgers front office have wanted and been interested in Nolan Arenado in a trade for years. And we know old Nolan Arenado is unhappy with the Rockies. And there could be some other big name third basemen that were missing also. I think the Dodgers were interested in Josh Donaldson, but not the money they were talking about. So the scenario is that if the Dodgers have an opportunity to get a guy like Nolan Arenado, you do it.
Of course.
And you either bring back Justin Turner as the Chase Utley backup second baseman veteran off the bench role, if Justin Turner is willing to do that.
Yeah.
Or you say, retire on top as a champion, and we're going to give you a job with this team or as an assistant coach or something, and we want you still within the organization.
For sure. Put them up in the front office, special
something.
consultant.
But if they have a chance to get a guy like Nolan Arenado, I'm just saying hypothetically, you do it, period. And the Dodgers are always looking for the future and the present, so they will have plan A, plan B, plan C, and Justin Turner will be somewhere in those plans. But those could be a scenario where he doesn't return. As for the rest of the guys, we'll just go down the order. Blake Trinan is a free agent. He's now a champion. The gamble worked on a guy that was a former all-star closer and had come off in 2019. It works. He was one of your best relievers. He did it. He's going to get paid somewhere else. I don't think he comes back. Jock Peterson
wants an everyday role.
Exactly. I don't think he'll ever get it. I'll be honest with you. Most of these teams have gone number analytics heavy. He's going to be starting against right-handed pitching wherever he goes. But the Dodgers have been trying to move him now for the last 3 seasons. They trade him in the offseason. His contract is up. He's going to want more money. I don't necessarily think he's deserving of it because he's a home run or strikeout kind of hitter, a boom or bust kind of guy. There is money to be had for him out there on the market. And a team maybe like the Chicago White Sox that's on the rise and looking to spend and looking to get over the top. Maybe they want a guy like that in the lineup and a lefty there against right-handed pitching. So he's
been linked to the White Sox sorry to interrupt. He's been linked to the White Sox a few times, according to my sources, that the Dodgers and the White Sox have talked about Jock a few times. They just never pulled the trigger on a deal. So that wouldn't surprise me either.
Maybe the Angels want him again too. Now that he's a free agent, they don't have to trade for him. So I don't think Jock returns. Kike Hernandez, here's one that might also come back. He would be my 1B behind Justin Turner as likely to return. I don't think the Dodgers see the value of Kike on what maybe he could make on the open market. But this is another situation where is Kike willing to take a little bit of a hometown discount? And he might be for multiple reasons. 1, he's a fan favorite. 2, I know he loves being in LA. 3, his current wife, who is pregnant with their child, she wants to be an actress. She's been working in Hollywood. She's been doing roles in LA. It would be hard to see them, moving to like Minnesota, for example. I'm just giving you a city there where she'd be able to still do that. And if she has a say in this, maybe Kike would take a discount to stay with LA for his family and things like that. So that's a possibility. But I'm not so sure. I don't think the Dodgers are like, we absolutely 100% need Kike for what he does. We have Gavin Lux is, a guy coming up to take over second base, things they could do in free agency to get in guys. But if Kike is willing to take a discount and continue to be the super utility guy he's been, then, he might be able to return. Alex Wood is a free agent. I don't think he's coming back at all. There's no place for him in the rotation. I think he was hoping he could showcase himself with the Dodgers this year and get some bigger money on free agency. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to stay healthy during the regular season. He did show some good signs there in Game 6, but he's going to want to go become a starting pitcher in a rotation somewhere. Pedro Baez is an interesting one.
He got better the last 2 years.
The Dodgers the Dodgers may be willing to give him some money to come back, but honestly, he's going to be 34 years old. He's not a fan favorite. And I don't think the Dodgers necessarily feel the need to re-sign him as well. And like I said, I don't think Jimmy Nelson or Jake McGee come back either. Those guys were flyers anyways. So those are the free agent moves internally. I think maybe, like I said, maybe 2 out of those 8 you might see come back. I think the rest let go. And then as far as improvements, there's not a lot. You have guys in the farm system that come up that need to get some chances. And and like you said, David Price is coming back potentially next year if we're not in this COVID situation by next March. But at the same time, I would love to see the Dodgers go get a guy like Trevor Bauer, another frontline starting pitcher, potentially it's available. And the reason why I say this is because I think Trevor Bauer wants to come here or to a team like this in a big market. B, I think the Padres are right there with you and they're loading up and they now have a couple frontline starter guys, rotation guys. And I don't think it behooves you if you're the Dodgers, especially what we saw from Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin in the postseason in the World Series, to just trust on them and 2 aging pitchers on the back half of their career in Kershaw and Price. If you can get another frontline guy in his prime on like a 3 or 4 year deal or something, if you can get anyone, whether it's Trevor Bauer or somebody else, that would be the one big move I'd like to see the Dodgers get to make sure that they don't get passed up by the Padres.
It's a very good point. And the market is kind of soft for starting pitching. I think you have Bauer, you have Marcus Stroman, you might have a couple other guys, maybe some other guys on the trade block that could be made available. But no, those are great points. Arenado and Bauer could be somebody that could help the team. I personally, I'm just going to leave this with this one last point. I would understand if the Dodgers choose not to bring back some of these guys. One, because they want to command a lot. They may want to command a lot of money. And 2, you have all these young players that you got to play. Edwin Rios is another one. Gavin Lux. You got Matt Beatty. You got DJ Peters over the next couple of years that could be ready to get called up and have a spot there. You've already extended Max Muncy, extended Chris Taylor. So there's only so many spots available. So it could be hard for these guys to say, yeah, I'm going to come back on a discount on another part-time role when another team may not be a winning environment. But if I got a chance to make some Benjamins here, I got to do what's best for my career. We've seen that from other star free agents. I would like to see Blake Trinan back only because of this. I'm not sure if Gratterall is ready to take on that closer role, and Trinan could at least be that security blanket stopgap between, phasing Jansen out and bringing Gratterall up. I think he could be that kind of stopgap player. And I think also, too, worst comes to worst, I think he'd be comfortable with the 8th inning setup role. Just my opinion.
Yeah, so 2 things that you mentioned there that are important to note. Money, right? The money's not going to be there in this free agency market because of COVID and because of the billions of dollars that Major League Baseball lost this season. You're already seeing it happen. The fact that the Cleveland Indians declined the option on Brad Hand, an all-star reliever and closer, at only $10 million, which is what they paid Blake Trinan, by the way, the Dodgers paid Blake Trinan, is stunning to me and tells you that these small market teams are going to get hammered, which is a opportunity. I hate to say this, an opportunity for a big market team like the Dodgers, who just won the World Series, who, even though they didn't get the ticket sales gates that they got, I'm sure they're making tons of money on merch and stuff like this. There's an opportunity for them with their pocketbooks, especially with some of the money coming off the books in Justin Turner and even coming off the books next year in Kershaw and Kenley, that they can really steal some guys here at a bargain price because the market's just not going to be there the way you think for some of these guys. So for Blake Trinan, for example, I mean, yeah, if he goes out there and says, I can't even make 10 million what I made this year with the Dodgers, okay, I'd be willing to come back. Sure. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think with Blake Trinan, he's going to be 34 years old. He's on the back end of his deal. He did have a resurgence this year, that's for sure. But there were some signs, especially in the postseason, where he wasn't, the dominant guy that we thought.
Yeah.
And so maybe the Dodgers say, we squeezed the towel out of him. We squeezed the last drops of water. We got what we needed. Let's let him go somewhere else if he's going to be making that. And let's go spend that 10 million on Brad Hand, than Blake Trinan, for example. And as you said, like if Jock Peterson goes, which we think, that gives an opportunity for DJ Peters. If Kike Hernandez goes, that gives an opportunity for a guy like Zach McAllister and Gavin Lux, like we said. So by free agents leaving, those leave some spots and openings. You know, Jimmy Nelson was going to be coming in probably to be maybe a starter if he can be healthy, and maybe a long relief guy. Like they said, the Dodgers like to take flyers on guys like that. So we'll see what they get. But that's the big thing I want to point out to you is the free agency market and the money is not going to be there for some of these guys like you're talking. And the Dodgers have a chance to pounce on some players that they can overpay compared to these small market teams, and get some guys on some deals, on some bargains. And I hope that they do that and take advantage of that, because they're one of the few teams that can right now. And like I said, the biggest thing is we know the Padres see an opportunity.
Sure.
They already went big during the regular season. The Vegas odds have them as the third favorite to win the World Series behind the Dodgers and Yankees. So I think the Padres are going to go for it as well. And the Dodgers need to keep pace. So
great stuff, Mike. Unbelievable, man. This was a very fun podcast, very insightful, ton of information. Love the breakdowns. Really appreciate you coming on, and once again, just being generous with your time. But then again, I think I bring it out of you a little bit.
Yeah, you do, because you know your stuff too, which is important. It's not just a national radio guy who's got 3 questions without knowing the team. You know the team and you're a fan as well, so it makes for good banter and good discussion.
I appreciate the time, Mike. Tell my listeners how they could follow your stuff.
Well, I'm going to be going on vacation here for a little bit because I've been burnt at both ends for the last couple months. But you can follow me on all social media, Michael J. Duarte, and all my articles and TV hits and stuff on NBCLosAngeles.com. And I'll be back here in a couple weeks with Rams coverage and USC Trojans college football starting this Saturday against Arizona State. So that's
Heck yeah, we want to see more championships here in LA, man. We don't have enough right now. So hopefully,
exactly.
Rams are coming off of a tough loss this weekend, but we'll see what happens. We're only at the halfway mark right now. You got the bye week coming. Hopefully they work some things out and get back into it. But enjoy your time off. I'll have you back on in the not so distant future. And we'll keep talking Dodgers. We'll get into some Lakers stuff. I don't know. We're going to have 2 off seasons going on at the same time. It's going to be wild, man. It's going to be a wild winter.
Absolutely.
Mike,
all right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. Enjoy your time off, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye. You're good, man.